Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I have yet another calculator to show you, another mathematical calculator you may want to use in your math class. So it's a slope formula calculator, and if you don't already know what the slope formula calculator is, it's y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So it's going to take in 4 of these values. I can enter in literally anything I want. I'll just enter in all ones, and my slope is 0, because if they're all the same, then there's really no slope. It's just a straight line, so there's no inclination. There won't be a tilt on your line, which is why your slope will be 0. So let's get started. So the first thing I'll do is get rid of all this code so we can start from scratch like always. Then I'll generate my boilerplate code, and in between my two body tags I'll create a div and give this div an ID of container1, and I'll create another container and name it container2, and I'll create an h1, so I'll just name it slope formula, create a br tag which forces whatever we type next to go onto the next line, and then I'll create a span tag, and then I'll type calculator. So now if we refresh and save, we have this text right here on our browser. Alright, once we're done doing that, we can create 2 inputs and give them a type of number. And what this does is it will allow you to use these arrows to increase your number or decrease it. So you can set it to whatever number you want, but I want the maximum value to be 200 and the minimum value to be 1, so you can't go any lower than 1. And the value that you start with, the default value, will be 1 as well. So you see, even if I refreshed, the 1 is still there, and if I tried going below 1, it won't let me. And let's say I just set this to 199, and now I tried going over 200, it won't let me as well unless I set this higher than 200. That's basically how max and min works with HTML inputs. And I'll do the same thing for this input. Min equals 1, value equals 1, and we can just copy these two and then just paste it like that, and this will have a placeholder of x1, make sure the x is capitalized, and this one will have a placeholder of y1, and this one will have a placeholder of y2, this one will be y2, and this should actually be x2, and if we want to, we can even put them on different lines. And I should just get rid of this value property because our placeholder isn't showing because of the value property. So let me just get rid of that. Now if we refresh, we have our placeholder. And then I can just give this an ID of x1. This might probably be the most boring process of all in this video in my opinion, but don't worry, we'll be done in a second. And I'll give this an ID of y2, and then underneath all those inputs I'm going to create a button and give an ID of button, and I'll just call it calculate. And now on our screen we have a button that does nothing because we haven't added any JavaScript to it yet. And then outside of our container2 but still within our container1 div, we're going to create another div with the ID of result. This will display our result. And now we can get started with some JavaScript. So the first thing I'll do is store my button in a variable called button. Once we're done doing that, we can create another variable called result, and then after we're done with those, we can create an event listener for our button. Make sure it listens for a click event so that when we click on it, it'll do something. And in here, I'll just create a bunch of variables starting with x1 dot value, because it will be whatever we passed in, which is why we typed dot value. And to speed things up, we can copy and paste that like that. And now we just have to modify it a little bit, change this to x2. So I'll fix that, that's x2, and this will be y2, and change their variable's name as well. So this is x2, this is y2, all with the dot value suffix at the end. And then we can do var y difference equals y2 minus y1. So it's going to take whatever we passed in for our y2 value and y1 value and subtract y1 from y2, and we'll have x difference as well, x2 minus x1. And then we'll create another variable called result, but this one will be with a capital R so it won't get mistaken with this one right here. So make sure you capitalize the R or just name it a totally different name, and then give it a value of y difference minus x difference. And now we just have to do result.inner HTML equals your slope is colon space plus result. So this right here is what we would call in JavaScript string concatenation. It's basically where you connect two different strings together to form a longer string. And now we're done with our JavaScript, so let's test it out. So if I pass in 1, 1, 1, and 1, my slope will be 0. And it looks like everything is working just fine, but we have to make it more colorful so we can add some CSS to it. Okay, now that we're done with our HTML and JavaScript, we can start with some CSS. So the first thing I'll do is create my style tags by typing style. So now the first thing I'll style will be my everything selector. So I'll style everything on my web page and give it a padding of 0, margin 0, and then box sizing will be set to border box, which makes sizing things a little bit easier in my opinion. And then we can style our browser and give it a display of flex, justify content center, align items center, and height will be 100 VH, which will move it down to the center right here. And then we can style our container too and give this a background color of RGB 180, 178, 168. And then once we're done with that, we can give it a padding of 100 pixels so that there's more space for our elements in the container. And then we'll do transition 0.3 seconds linear, because soon we'll be adding some hover properties onto it and we want it to transition nice and smoothly. Then we'll give it a border radius of 20 pixels, and now you'll notice that the edges have rounded itself. And then after that we can select our H1 and give it a color of white, font family, sans serif, position relative. So basically right now what we're doing is we want this to move over to the right a little bit, so we can do bottom 80 pixels, which will move it up 80 pixels away from the bottom 80 pixels, and then we'll do left 54 pixels, font size 3 rem, and now you'll notice it's not quite where we want it to be yet, and I don't know why it keeps closing the window like that. Okay, left 54 pixels I think is too much, so let's try 24. Okay, that looks decent. And then after that we can style our inputs. So we'll select input and we'll give it a position of relative, left 95 pixels, bottom 45 pixels, margin 27 pixels. So that will space it out from each other. Now you'll notice there's a bigger gap in between each input. And then background color transparent. Now you'll notice this white rectangle just goes away. And we'll give it a border of 1 pixel solid black, so it doesn't have that grayish black border. Either it be black or gray. Don't mix in a bunch of colors together. It just looks ugly in my opinion. And then we'll just do transform scale 1.8, which will scale it 80% and make it 180% its original size. And then border top color transparent. So you'll notice now the top border goes away, and we want our left border to go away as well, so we'll do border left color transparent, and then border right color transparent, and then we'll do text align center, so that whatever number we type in here will be right in the center of it. And then we'll do color white, so whatever text we type will be white. Font weight bold, which makes it just a little bit easier to see, and cursor pointer, which is probably one of my favorite properties. So what this does is when you hover over it, you'll notice that your cursor turns into this finger hand, whatever it is, this hand icon. But when you hover off of it, it just goes back to this normal arrow cursor. And there's a bunch of other values you can try, like cell. So when you hover over it, now your cursor will look like this. It will look like a cross. And you can try it out yourself. It's pretty interesting, so I recommend you guys go try it out. And then we'll do input placeholder. So this is basically selecting our placeholder since we have the two semicolons. And we'll make sure that the text will be aligned in the center. And then we can do color white. So now the input will be white. It no longer looks like a placeholder, it just looks like text. But that's okay. And make it bold, or actually it's already bold, so we don't have to do that. Since this property right here also applies to our placeholder, since it's also part of the input. And then I'll type input :focus, which just means when we click on our input, it does something. And what I wanted to do is to get rid of the outline. So now when you click on it, there's no more outline, like the rectangular outline that goes around it. I don't like it when it has that, but you can keep it if you want to. It's just my preference. And then I'll give my button a padding of 20 pixels, border radius 100 pixels, border transparent, and then cursor pointer as well, position relative, right 100 pixels, width 100%, which means it will take up 100% of the available space. And then I'll do left 10 pixels, and then font size 2 rem. And now we can add a focus property for our button. So I'll do outline none as well, and then background color yellow. So when we click on it, our button will turn yellow. Now you see it turns yellow. And also, when we hover over our button, we want to give it a box shadow of inset 007 pixel black. So now when we hover over it, it gets this shadow around its border. But if I tried removing inset, you'll notice the difference immediately. So now it's on the outside, but when we type inset, the shadow is on the inside. So that's pretty cool. And then for our span, we can do position relative, left 45 pixels, color red, so our result will be red. And give it a font family of sans serif as well. Give it a position value of relative to the bottom, move it away from the bottom 85 pixels, left 35 pixels, 4.3 rem, which will be roughly maybe 60 or 70 pixels. And that's pretty much all we need for our project. So you'll notice that it's working just fine now, except our H1 is too far to the left. We have to move it back a little bit, move it to the right. So I can do, let me go find my H1. Oh, this should be 124 maybe. How about 154? That should be enough. Definitely no more than 174. Okay, great. That's perfect now. So now if I tried entering in my values like 1, 1, 1, and 1, I get 0, which makes sense since the slope isn't really changing. And this is it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more videos just like this. And if you have any feedbacks or any questions regarding this project or coding in general, let me know in the comments below and I'll answer you as soon as possible. And this is it for the video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in my next video.